Welcome to this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really fascinating mix of sources that you've sent us for this week's deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got kind of the gamut. We've got everything from like major global power shifts to surprising economic success stories
hmm
to some cultural trends that are really interesting and happening all around the world.
Yeah, it's quite a mixture, and I think it reflects just um how much is going on in the world at the moment.
Right, and that's kind of our mission today is to like try to connect the dots
Yeah.
between these seemingly disparate things and to try to figure out, what is the bigger picture that's emerging from all this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
And I guess we could start with a pretty major shakeup in the Middle East, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria.
Yeah.
After decades of rule, it's come to an end. But the future of the country is anything but certain.
Yeah, it's a truly pivotal moment for Syria, I think. And the implications I think extend far beyond the borders of Syria. I mean, this
Yeah,
is a real turning point in the history of the Middle East, potentially.
yeah, for sure.
And the group now in control, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, it has a complex and controversial history.
Yeah,
It's been linked with Al Qaeda in the past, and so there are obviously huge concerns,
yeah,
about the direction the country may be heading in.
absolutely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of those situations where I think the world is watching very, very closely
Yeah.
because, on the one hand, you don't want to see a group that has any ties to terrorism take control.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, destabilizing this government could lead to even more chaos, which could potentially spill over into neighboring countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
It's a delicate situation.
yeah, it is, and it's one of those situations where I think the US in particular will have to tread incredibly carefully because it's not at all clear, what the best approach is. I mean, on the one hand,
Right.
as you say, you don't want to see this group, in control of the country potentially.
Right.
But,
Right.
any attempt to get rid of them could actually backfire and create an even worse situation.
Right.
And so I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, within the incoming Trump administration about how to deal with this. I mean, how to
Yeah.
approach it.
Yeah, and the geopolitical implications too are just fascinating
Oh, absolutely.
because you've got Iran and Russia who are such staunch allies of Assad,
Yeah.
and now they're kind of in this precarious position.
Yeah.
Um, you know, does this represent an opportunity for the West to exert more influence?
Yeah, I think it potentially does, but again, I think it's a situation that requires
Right.
a very, cautious and strategic approach, I think.
Right.
It's certainly not one where you can just go in, guns blazing.
Right. Right.
This is something that requires a lot of thought and careful planning.
Yeah. I mean, talk about like navigating a tricky situation.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears for a second. Talk about a country that's pulled off what some are calling an economic miracle. Greece.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, remember when they were the poster child for economic crisis?
I remember it well.
Well, hold on your hats, because now they're predicted to be the best performing economy in the rich world for 2024.
It really is a remarkable turnaround,
Right.
especially when you contrast it with, what's been happening in the U.S. economy, which has been, relatively modest in its growth. I think
Right.
it's been steady, but not spectacular, whereas Greece has really seen a very dramatic
Right.
improvement.
And it's not like the traditional industries either, right?
No, no.
That fueled this growth.
Absolutely not. I mean, the Greek economy has been really boosted by a few things. Tourism, obviously, has been a big factor.
Right.
They've seen a huge surge in tourism, and also investments in renewable energy. So they've made a very conscious decision to, diversify their economy
Right.
and to focus on sectors that have, strong growth potential. And that's really paid off for them.
It's almost like, they took the lemons that life threw at them and made a whole lemonade stand.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
And so
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder, are there valuable lessons here for other countries that are grappling with economic hardship?
Yeah, I think there are definitely lessons to be learned from
Right.
the Greek experience. I mean, they did implement some very tough but necessary reforms.
Yeah.
They embraced fiscal discipline. They really tightened their belts and they made some strategic investments in sectors that they felt had, strong growth potential.
Right.
And it's a testament, I think, to the power of smart economic policies
Yeah.
and a willingness to adapt to changing circumstances.
Say right.
I think those are two key takeaways from the Greek story.
Oh, really? Absolutely. Well, let's hop across the Atlantic for a second to the U.S., where the stock market is, shall we say, exuberantly celebrating Trump's reelection.
Yeah, I was going to say exuberant is one way to put it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of excitement, obviously, among investors
Yeah.
about the prospect of another 4 years of Trump.
Right.
The S&P 500 is soaring. Companies are enjoying very low borrowing costs.
Right.
There's a lot of optimism.
Yeah. Yeah. But it almost feels a little too good to be true.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Right. I mean, are we on the verge of another financial bubble?
I think it's a question worth considering. I mean, I remember the VIX spike back in August.
Oh, right, right.
The volatility index, which is often called the fear gauge.
Right.
It jumped quite dramatically. And I think that's an indication that even amidst all this exuberance, there are some investors who are sensing, a potential instability, lurking beneath the surface.
And that was a bit of a red flag.
It was, I think it was a sign that, maybe things aren't quite as rosy as they appear.
Right, right. And this exuberant market is happening against this backdrop of, increasing complexity in the financial world.
Yeah.
One trend that's raising eyebrows among some analysts is the rise of speculative ETFs.
Yes.
Exchange traded funds.
Yes. These have become incredibly popular.
Right.
They offer investors a very easy way to diversify their portfolios.
Right.
But some of these ETFs are focused on very specific and sometimes risky assets.
Right.
And when you combine that with these very low borrowing costs, it creates a recipe for potential volatility.
Right.
So it's not necessarily a bubble in the making, but it's definitely a situation that warrants careful monitoring.
Yeah, it's like a proceed with caution sign flashing in the markets.
Exactly.
Well, let's shift gears again to a topic that's been sparking quite a bit of debate in the UK, and that's foreign aid.
Yeah.
The UK's recent decision to prioritize domestic refugee spending over international development has drawn some criticism.
Yeah.
Particularly the fact that they're only spending a little over half of their target of 0.7% of GNI on foreign aid.
It's a difficult balancing act, isn't it? I mean, between, the needs of refugees within your own country and the needs of those in developing countries.
Right.
And I think this is a debate that's going on in a lot of countries at the moment, especially as, the number of displaced people worldwide continues to rise.
Right.
How do you balance those competing demands?
Right.
And I think the UK's approach, is one that a lot of people are watching very closely.
Yeah, and it raises those complex ethical questions too, right?
It does, yeah. I mean, about, the responsibility of wealthy nations to assist those in need, both, within their borders and beyond. There's a moral imperative on the one hand to provide refuge to those who are fleeing, conflict and persecution.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's also, a long-standing commitment, I think, to addressing poverty and inequality in developing countries.
Right.
So it's a tough one to balance, I think.
It is, yeah. And it's a reminder, I think, that, even the best intentions can sometimes lead to difficult choices.
Yeah.
And unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's go to something a little lighter, but no less fascinating.
Okay.
And let's talk about ancestry tourism.
Oh, yeah.
Who knew that Culloden, the site of a historic battle in Scotland, would become more popular than the Battle of Hastings?
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And apparently it's all because of this surge in ancestry tourism.
Yeah.
Everybody's suddenly, obsessed with tracing their roots and connecting with their heritage.
It's a trend that's been building for a while, I think.
Right. Yeah.
It's fueled, I think, by a growing fascination with genealogy.
Yeah.
And also the ease with which we can now, access information about our family history.
Right.
Thanks to websites like ancestry.com and companies like 23andMe.
Right.
It's relatively easy to trace your family tree and to find out where your ancestors came from. And that, I think, is leading to this this boom in ancestry tourism.
It's like a personalized time machine almost, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think for a lot of people,
Yeah.
it's much more than just, visiting a historical site.
Right.
It's about, experiencing the culture, the food, the music,
Right.
even the language of your ancestors.
Right.
And I think it's a way to really deepen your understanding of
Yeah.
who you are and where you come from.
Right. And it's having a significant impact on the tourism industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean, especially in places like Scotland.
Yeah.
They're seeing this influx of visitors,
Yeah.
especially from the U.S.,
Yeah.
who are just, eager to connect with their Celtic roots.
Yeah, and companies like Airbnb are really capitalizing on this trend. They're partnering with companies like 23andMe
Right.
to offer, tailored travel experiences based on your DNA results.
Right.
So you can actually go and, book a stay in the very village where your great-great-grandparents came from.
Yeah, it's really remarkable.
It is. It's fascinating.
It is. Well, speaking of fascinating journeys, let's head over to the Caribbean, where they're facing an energy dilemma
Oh, yeah.
that's both challenging and full of potential.
Yeah, this is a real irony, I think.
Yeah.
The Caribbean is blessed with, abundant renewable energy resources.
Yeah.
They've got solar, wind, geothermal, you name it.
Right.
And yet they're still heavily reliant on these expensive
Yeah.
imported fossil fuels. And as a result, they have some of the highest electricity prices in the world.
It's a classic case, I think, of like potential versus reality.
It is, yes.
You've got all this clean energy just waiting to be harnessed.
Yeah.
And yet they're stuck in this cycle of, dependence on dirty and costly fossil fuels.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's like, why wouldn't they switch?
You'd think it'd be a no-brainer, but it's not that simple, unfortunately.
So what's holding them back?
Well, I think there are a number of factors.
Yeah.
Financial constraints are a big one. A lot of these islands simply don't have the money to invest in the infrastructure needed
Okay.
to develop these renewable energy sources.
Right.
There's also a lack of private investment. A lot of investors are still wary of putting their money into these small island developing states.
Right.
And then there are the bureaucratic hurdles.
Oh, yeah.
Permitting processes are often very slow and cumbersome.
Oh, yeah.
And so it can take years to get a renewable energy project off the ground.
Yeah. Are there any bright spots?
There are some glimmers of hope. I mean, some islands are making real progress.
Okay.
Barbados, for example, has set a target of being 100% reliant on renewable energy by 2030.
Wow.
Which is very ambitious, but they seem to be on track to achieve it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think there's also a growing recognition that, investing in clean energy can not only, reduce their dependence on fossil fuels, but it can also create new economic opportunities.
Right. New jobs and things like that.
Exactly.
Well, let's shift our focus now to a region where political instability and economic hardship are fueling unrest. And I'm talking about Africa, specifically Mozambique.
Yeah.
Where a disputed election has sparked anger and frustration.
Right.
Especially among young people in urban areas.
It's a story that's sadly familiar in many parts of Africa, isn't it?
It is.
You've got decades of corruption, inequality, lack of opportunities, and it creates, this breeding ground for discontent. Right.
And in Mozambique, the situation's further complicated by the legacy of these hidden debts.
Right.
That have crippled the economy and left ordinary citizens really struggling to make ends meet.
It's a reminder that economic grievances can be such a powerful driver
Absolutely.
of social unrest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, when people feel like the system is rigged against them
Right.
and they have no hope for a better future,
Yeah.
they're more likely to take to the streets and demand change.
Right. And in a world where information travels so quickly, it's easier than ever for these movements to kind of gain momentum and spread across borders.
Yeah, and we're seeing a new generation of activists
Right.
who are tech-savvy, who are connected,
Right.
who are determined to hold their leaders accountable.
Right. It's a sign that the old ways of doing things are
Yes.
no longer acceptable.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, people are demanding transparency,
Right.
accountability, a fairer share of the pie. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to make their voices heard.
No, they're not. And I think that's a good thing ultimately. It's a force for change.
Yeah.
But it also presents challenges,
Right.
How do you channel that energy constructively? How do you address these deep-seated grievances in a way that leads to lasting solutions?
Right.
Not just, temporary fixes.
Absolutely.
These are the questions facing leaders, across Africa and beyond, I think.
Yeah, it's a reminder that building a more just and equitable world
Mm-hmm.
requires more than just economic growth,
Yeah.
right? Requires
So,
addressing issues of power and privilege and opportunity,
yeah, I completely agree.
and listening to the
Yeah,
voices of those who have been marginalized for far too long.
absolutely.
Um, well, let's move from the streets of Mozambique to the halls of power in Israel,
Okay.
where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu
Yeah.
is facing a pretty unprecedented situation.
He is,
He's leading a nation
yeah.
through multiple conflicts
Uh-huh.
while simultaneously defending himself against corruption charges in court.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary situation.
It is.
I mean, on the one hand,
Right.
you have a leader who is seen as indispensable by many.
Right.
Someone with vast experience,
Yes.
a deep understanding of, the complexities of the region.
Right.
Um, on the other hand,
Yeah.
there is this growing sense that no one is above the law
Right.
and that even the most powerful figures must be held accountable for their actions.
Right. It's like this classic dilemma of, do you prioritize stability and continuity,
Yeah.
or do you uphold the principles of justice and accountability?
And how do you navigate that?
Right.
That delicate balance when the stakes are so high.
Right.
I mean, this is a question that is dividing Israeli society.
Yeah.
And it has the potential, I think, to reshape the country's political landscape.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
It will, yeah.
Well, from a story of political intrigue,
Yeah.
let's go to one of resilience and hope. And let's talk about the Sudanese national football team,
Oh, yeah.
which has continued to pursue its dreams despite facing unimaginable challenges.
It's an incredible story.
It is. I mean, imagine you're in the midst of a civil war.
Yeah.
Your country is grappling with internal displacement
Yeah.
and stadium looting.
Yeah.
And yet,
Yeah.
you're still
Yeah.
fighting for a spot in the World Cup.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Talk about dedication.
It is. I mean, it's a testament to the power of sport, I think, to
Yeah.
unite and inspire even in the darkest of times.
Yeah.
For these players, football is more than just a game.
Right.
It's a symbol of hope.
Right.
It's a way to represent their country on the world stage.
Right.
And it's a source of pride and resilience in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. And it's not just the players either, right?
Yeah.
It's the Sudanese people themselves who have rallied around this team.
Yeah.
And are offering support and an encouragement.
Absolutely. And I think it's a reminder that, yeah.
Even in the midst of, conflict and hardship, the human spirit can prevail.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and it's also heartwarming to see the international community stepping up to support the team as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
they've been given a training base in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Libya has generously hosted some of their matches.
Wow.
And it's just, it's a beautiful example, I think, of
Yeah.
solidarity and sportsmanship transcending,
Yeah.
borders and political divides.
It's a reminder that even in a world that's often, filled with conflict and division,
Yeah.
there's still room for compassion and generosity and the pursuit of shared dreams.
I love that. Love that. Yeah.
Well, speaking of pursuing dreams, let's move on to a story about a nation that's grappling with its past and fighting for its future. And I'm talking about South Korea.
Yeah.
President Yoon Suk Yeol's recent attempt to impose martial law has sent shockwaves through the country.
It has. Yeah.
Yeah. It's evoked memories of a very dark chapter in South Korea's history.
It has.
This is the first time that such a measure has been considered since the era of military dictator Chun Do-won.
Yeah. And it's a stark reminder that, the ghosts of the past can often haunt the present.
They can.
Right.
Yes.
And that, the hard-won freedoms of democracy are always vulnerable
They are.
to those who seek to, exploit power for their own gain.
Absolutely. And what's particularly striking, I think, about this situation is the public's response.
Yeah.
The streets have filled with protesters.
Right.
There have been calls for Yoon's resignation.
Right.
And it's a sign, I think, that South Korean society has come a long way
It has.
since the days of authoritarian rule.
Absolutely.
People are no longer willing to tolerate this kind of blatant power grab.
Right.
They're ready to fight for their democratic rights.
And it's a powerful testament to the enduring spirit of the South Korean people.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And their commitment to a democratic future.
It is. Yeah.
Well, let's
Yeah.
turn our attention now to another country that's grappling with its own set of challenges, and that's Bangladesh.
Okay.
For years, the narrative surrounding Bangladesh has been one of economic success,
Yeah.
right? This so-called miracle,
Right.
fueled by rapid growth and development under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina.
Right.
But a recent white paper has kind of cast a shadow over this narrative,
Yeah. This.
alleging widespread corruption and data manipulation.
Yeah. It's a sobering reminder, I think,
Right,
that
yeah.
even the most impressive economic statistics
Right.
can sometimes mask underlying
Okay.
problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this white paper raises some very serious concerns, I think,
Right.
about the true state of Bangladesh's economy
Yeah.
and the extent to which corruption may be undermining its progress.
It's a story that's unfortunately all too familiar.
It is,
Uh-huh.
yeah, in many parts of the world. I mean,
Yeah.
when unchecked power and a lack of accountability become entrenched,
Right.
it creates an environment where corruption can flourish
Yeah.
and where resources are siphoned away from those who need them most.
Right. And it erodes public trust.
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Um, the white paper estimates that a staggering $234 billion was siphoned out of the country between 2009 and 2023.
That is a huge amount of money.
It's a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a lost opportunity,
It is.
for Bangladesh to invest in its people, its infrastructure, its future.
Absolutely. It's a wake-up call, I think.
It is, yeah.
For the interim government
Yeah,
to prioritize transparency and accountability and the rule of law.
absolutely. And to make sure that, the benefits of economic growth
Right.
are shared equitably and that those responsible for corruption are held accountable.
Yeah, it's a daunting task, but it's essential for them to tackle it.
It is, yeah, if they want to achieve sustainable and inclusive development.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on now to a topic that has often been a source of both unity and tension between India and Pakistan, and that's cricket.
Oh, cricket.
India's recent refusal to send its cricket team to Pakistan for the Champions Trophy
Yeah,
really kind of highlights the complex and often fraught relationship
he does, yeah.
between these two nuclear-armed neighbors.
Yeah, cricket's always been seen as a kind of a barometer
Yeah.
for relations between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's acted as a bridge,
Right.
sometimes as a battleground.
Yeah.
And in this case, I think it's fair to say it's more of the latter.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand the historical context here.
It is, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks, which India blames on Pakistan-based militants,
Right.
have cast a long shadow over the relationship.
They have, yeah.
And that led to a freeze in bilateral cricket ties.
Right.
And then you've got the ongoing dispute over Kashmir.
Right. Which just further complicates matters.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And it makes it very difficult
Yeah.
to separate sport from politics in this case.
Right. It's a reminder that even in a globalized world, historical baggage and unresolved conflicts
Yeah,
can continue to shape relationships between nations.
absolutely.
Right. And make it difficult to find common ground and build trust.
It's very true. Yeah.
Well, let's shift from the cricket pitch now
Okay.
to the mountains of garbage.
Yeah.
And let's talk about a challenge that's facing many rapidly growing nations, and that's waste management.
Yeah,
In India, the situation is particularly acute
it is. Yeah.
with overflowing landfills,
Yeah.
inadequate waste collection,
Yeah.
and a looming crisis as waste generation is projected to double by 2031.
It's a huge problem, and it's only going to get bigger.
It is, right.
Yeah.
It's not going away.
No,
And it's a complex issue,
it is. Yeah.
right, with no easy solutions.
Yeah. Rapid urbanization, changing consumption patterns,
Right.
lack of infrastructure.
Right.
These have all contributed to this growing problem.
And it's not just a matter of logistics either, right?
No, it's not. It's also about
Yeah.
changing attitudes and behaviors.
Yeah, we can't just keep burying our heads in the sand, or rather burying our trash in landfills.
Exactly. Yeah. We need to find more sustainable ways to manage our waste.
Right.
And that requires a collective effort,
Yeah.
From individuals, communities, and governments.
Right.
The government's Swachh Bharat 2.0 program, which aims to make cities garbage-free,
Right.
is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But its success, I think, hinges on effective implementation,
Yeah.
public awareness campaigns,
Right.
and a commitment to addressing the root causes of the problem,
Absolutely.
not just the symptoms.
Yeah, it's about changing our mindset.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
From one of disposability
Yeah.
to one of responsibility.
Absolutely.
It's about reducing our consumption,
Mm.
reusing what we can, and recycling whenever
I
possible.
completely agree.
Well, let's take a look at a trend That's caught many by surprise.
Yeah.
And that's China's newfound admiration for Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's a fascinating phenomenon,
It is.
especially considering, China's often adversarial stance towards the U.S.
Right.
But it seems that certain segments of Chinese society,
Yeah.
particularly those with, nationalistic leanings,
Right.
have developed an affinity for Trump,
Yeah.
for his strongman persona,
Right.
his business acumen,
Yeah.
and his willingness to kind of challenge the established global order.
It's a reminder, I think, that, political ideologies can be complex.
They can.
Right.
Yeah.
And often defy easy categorization.
Yeah, and I think it also highlights the
Yeah.
the complexities of Chinese nationalism and its evolving relationship with the West. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
while some in China, view the U.S. as a rival
Right.
and a threat,
Right.
others see it as, a model for economic success
Right.
and a source of cultural influence.
Yeah. It's a nuanced perspective that's often lost.
It is, yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
In the kind of the simplified narratives
Yeah.
of geopolitical rivalry.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, let's
Yeah.
let's shift gears again and talk about a challenge that's both personal and universal, and that's climate change.
Oh, yeah.
And specifically,
Let's focus on methane emissions, which are a far more potent heat-trapping gas than carbon dioxide.
right. It's one of those things that I think we often forget about, like those seemingly harmless cows,
Yeah.
grazing in the fields. They're actually
Yeah.
contributing significantly to climate change.
They are, yeah. It's not something that we often think about, but those cows burping and other bodily functions are actually having a big impact on our planet's climate.
It is. And it's not just the cows themselves, right?
No, it's not. It's the
Whole system.
whole system of livestock production.
Right.
From the feed they consume to the way that their manure is managed.
Yeah, it's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted approach.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number of promising solutions being developed, though.
Oh, okay, tell me about that.
So, you've got things like changing cow diets, improving manure management.
Okay.
And then there's some really cutting edge research going on into things like methane reducing feed additives
Wow.
and even vaccines.
So, like, you could vaccinate a cow and it would produce less methane.
That's the idea. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's still early days,
Right.
but there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I think it's a reminder that, tackling climate change requires a combination of ingenuity, collaboration, and a willingness to explore unconventional solutions.
Absolutely.
We can't just rely on the same old approaches.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking outside the box.
Yeah, we need to get creative.
Exactly. And I think this is a great example of that.
It is. Well, let's move on now to a market that's been making a comeback. That's cryptocurrency.
Oh, yeah.
Bitcoin is surging again, but this time it feels different.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, this rally is being driven by institutional investors.
Right.
Hedge funds, asset managers, even pension funds are now dipping their toes into the crypto waters.
So it's not just the, kind of the retail investors that were fueling the previous booms.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a sign, I think, that cryptocurrency is maturing as an asset class.
Right.
And that it's gaining acceptance
Right.
among mainstream financial institutions.
So are we witnessing like the institutionalization of cryptocurrency?
I think we are, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that raises some interesting questions about the future of crypto.
It does. Like, is it going to become more integrated into the traditional financial system?
Yeah.
Or is it going to remain kind of this decentralized and disruptive force?
I think that's the big question at the moment.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got these institutional investors who are coming in.
Right.
And they're bringing with them, their traditional ways of doing things. But on the other hand, you've still got this very strong community of crypto enthusiasts who are very committed to the idea of decentralization.
Right.
And so it's going to be interesting to see how these two forces play out.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating evolution to watch.
It is.
Well, let's turn our attention now to another ambitious goal
Okay.
of the incoming Trump administration, and that is achieving energy dominance for the U.S.
Ah, yes, drill, baby, drill is back.
Yeah.
But the question is, can it deliver on its promises
Right.
in a world that's increasingly focused on renewable energy
Right.
and combating climate change?
Yeah, I mean, Trump's vision of energy dominance really centers on boosting oil and gas production.
Yes.
Right. Dismantling environmental regulations.
Yeah.
and reviving the coal industry.
Yeah. It's a strategy that obviously appeals to his base.
It does.
But I think it faces some significant challenges.
What kind of challenges?
Well, for one thing,
Yeah.
the global energy market is in a state of flux. Right. Renewable energy sources are rapidly gaining ground.
Right.
Investor sentiment is shifting away from fossil fuels.
Right.
And so I think Trump's policies may face some headwinds, not just from environmental groups, but also from market forces that are driving the transition to a cleaner energy future.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful nations can't ignore these global trends that are shaping the energy sector.
Absolutely.
Well, let's delve into a topic now that's fundamental to a thriving society, and that is literacy.
Okay.
A recent report from the OECD has highlighted a worrying trend, and that's declining literacy and numeracy levels among adults in many developed nations.
Yeah, this is a real concern.
Yeah.
In an increasingly complex and technology-driven world, basic literacy and numeracy skills are more important than ever.
Right, and it's not just about, being able to read and write.
No, it's about being able to think critically, to solve problems, to adapt to new situations.
Right, it's about being able to participate fully in society.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
and contribute to the economy.
And it's not just an individual issue either.
No, it's a societal issue.
It's a societal issue.
Right.
A society with a high level of literacy
Right.
is more likely to be innovative, productive, resilient.
Right, it's a foundation.
It is.
Right, for social and economic progress.
Absolutely.
And so investing in education, particularly adult education, I think is crucial for addressing this decline.
I completely agree.
Let's shift our focus now to a field that's making the world a little bit smaller and a lot more accessible.
Oh, yeah.
And that is machine translation.
Machine translation, yeah. The progress in machine translation has been astonishing.
It has. I mean, AI-powered translation models are becoming so sophisticated.
Yeah, they are.
They're capable of producing translations that are, in many cases, indistinguishable from those produced by human translators.
It really is remarkable.
Yeah, it's a game changer for communication, right?
It is.
Enabling people from different cultures and linguistic backgrounds to connect and understand each other so much more easily.
Absolutely. I mean, just imagine a world
Yeah.
where language is no longer a barrier to
Right.
collaboration, innovation, cultural exchange.
It's incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And a recent study by Unbabel found that AI models are now performing nearly as well as human translators in certain tasks.
Yeah, and the concept of time to edit, which is a metric used to measure translation quality, has been steadily decreasing in recent years.
So that means, it takes less time for a human
Exactly.
to fix a machine translation.
Yeah, which means the machines are getting better.
That's amazing.
It is, yeah.
So does that mean human translators are going to be out of a job?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the short answer is no.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
while machines excel at translating literal meanings,
Right.
they still struggle with context, nuance,
Yeah.
the subtleties of human language.
Right.
And so I think human translators will continue to play a vital role
Yeah.
in ensuring that translations are not just accurate,
Right.
but also culturally appropriate.
Right.
And that they convey the intended meaning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's more of a case of,
Yeah.
technology augmenting human capabilities
Right.
rather than replacing them entirely.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating example of that.
It is.
Well, let's move now
Yeah.
from the cutting edge of language technology
You okay?
to a story of survival and resilience
Yeah.
in the face of conflict. And I'm talking about the Sudanese national football team.
Oh, yeah.
Amidst the civil war, internal displacement stadium looting this team is defying the odds
They are. Yeah.
and fighting for a spot in the World Cup.
It's an incredible story of resilience
It is.
and determination.
I mean, it's a story that reminds us that the human spirit can prevail,
Yeah.
even in the face of unimaginable adversity.
It really can. I mean, this team has faced
Yeah.
countless challenges, training disruptions,
Right.
travel difficulties,
Yeah.
the emotional toll of seeing their country torn apart by conflict.
Yeah.
And yet they've persevered,
Yeah.
driven by this shared passion for the sport
Yeah.
and this desire to represent their nation
On the world stage.
on the world stage.
It's amazing that, the international community has rallied around them as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
they've received support from,
Right.
all over the world.
Yeah.
They've been given, resources, training facilities.
Right.
Um, and it's just, it's a beautiful example, I think,
It is.
of how sport can bring people together.
Yeah. It's a reminder that even in a world that's often divided by conflict and strife,
Yep.
Yeah. There's still room for compassion
Absolutely.
and solidarity and the pursuit of shared goals.
I love that.
Well, speaking of pursuing goals, let's shift gears now to a topic that's been generating a lot of buzz lately, and that is agentic AI.
Oh, yeah, agentic AI. So this is artificial intelligence that can act on our behalf.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's becoming a reality.
Yeah.
The huge leap forward in artificial intelligence.
So it's not just about, having conversations with AI anymore.
No, it's not. It's about empowering AI systems
Right.
to complete tasks,
Right.
to achieve goals, to act as our representatives in the digital world.
Wow. The potential applications are kind of mind-boggling.
They are, yeah. I mean, just imagine,
Yeah.
having an AI that can
Yeah.
automate all those mundane tasks in the workplace,
Right.
that can create personalized educational experiences for our children,
Yeah.
that can manage our finances, our social lives.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless.
But it also raises some ethical questions.
It does, absolutely.
Right. I mean, how do we ensure that these AI agents are acting in our best interests?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we program morality and ethics into these systems?
Right.
How do we prevent them from being biased or discriminatory?
Right.
And what about the potential for these AI agents to be used for malicious purposes?
Right. Could they be hacked?
Exactly.
Right.
Could they be manipulated
Right.
to harm individuals or society as a whole?
Yeah. Those are all really important questions.
They are.
Yeah.
And I think we need to start thinking about them now.
Absolutely.
Before this technology gets too far ahead of us.
Right. It's a really fascinating and potentially transformative technology.
It is.
But it requires, I think, careful consideration
Yes.
and ethical guidelines to make sure it's used responsibly.
Absolutely.
Well, let's turn our attention now to a story that highlights the fragility of democracy
Okay.
and the importance of safeguarding hard-won freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
South Korea, a nation that has made remarkable progress in its transition to democracy,
It has.
is facing a new threat from within.
It is. Yeah. I mean, President Yoon Suk-yeol's recent attempt to impose martial law
Yeah.
has sparked outrage and protests across the country.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that, the transition to democracy is not a one-time event.
It's not. No.
Right. It's an ongoing process.
It's a process.
And it requires constant vigilance and a commitment to upholding those democratic values.
Absolutely. And I think what's particularly striking about this situation is the public's response.
Yeah, tell me about that.
South Korean citizens, many of whom remember the oppressive days of military rule,
Right.
took to the streets in large numbers
Yeah.
to denounce Yoon's actions and to demand that he respect their democratic rights.
It's a testament, I think, to the strength of South Korean civil society.
It is, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And their determination to safeguard those hard-won freedoms.
Absolutely.
Well, let's shift our focus now to a topic that's crucial, I think, for businesses that are operating in this increasingly complex and interconnected world,
Okay.
and that's managing risk.
Oh, yeah. Managing risk is absolutely essential.
It is.
In today's business environment,
Yeah.
companies are facing all sorts of challenges,
Yeah.
From geopolitical instability to cyber attacks to climate change.
Right.
And so it's more important than ever
Yeah.
for companies to have robust risk management strategies in place.
Right. And in recent high-profile corporate mishaps, I think,
Yeah.
things like the ouster of Intel's CEO and the legal battle over Elon Musk's Tesla compensation package.
Right.
They highlight the importance of effective corporate governance,
They do.
right, and risk management.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, these cases raise questions about, the role of corporate boards
Yeah.
in overseeing management,
Yeah.
and protecting shareholder interests, and ensuring that companies are operating ethically and responsibly.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to creating a culture of,
Yeah.
of accountability, transparency,
Right.
and ethical conduct.
Right. Not just at the executive level,
Not just at the top,
throughout the organization.
people at the organization.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that, reputation is a valuable asset
It is.
that can be easily damaged.
Easily damaged.
Right. And that even the most successful companies are vulnerable
Yeah.
to missteps and scandals.
Absolutely. And I think it's also about
Yeah.
building trust with stakeholders,
Right.
not just shareholders,
Yeah.
But employees, customers, the public at large,
Right.
companies need to be seen as trustworthy
Absolutely.
if they want to succeed in the long run.
Well said.
Hmm.
Um, well,
Okay.
let's revisit that remarkable economic comeback story we discussed earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Greece, the country that was once synonymous with financial crisis?
Yeah.
Well, hold on to your hats, because Greece has just been crowned the winner
Wow.
of the Economist's annual ranking of economic performance among 37 mostly rich countries.
That is
It's a
remarkable.
stunning turnaround
It is.
that few would have predicted just a few years ago.
No, absolutely not.
So what were the key factors that propelled them to the top?
Well, Greece's success was driven by a combination of factors,
Okay.
including strong GDP growth,
Okay.
a booming tourism industry, and,
Right.
and some structural reforms
Yeah.
that really improved the country's competitiveness.
So they kind of had it all going on.
They did, yeah. They ticked all the boxes.
It's a reminder that even countries facing seemingly insurmountable challenges can turn things around
Yeah.
with sound economic policy,
Yeah,
right, and a commitment to reform.
absolutely.
Well, let's
Okay.
let's shift our focus back to the U.S.,
Right.
where the Federal Reserve is facing a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
Taming inflation without triggering a recession
Right. It's a tough one.
is no easy feat.
It's not.
And the Fed's recent interest rate hikes, have sparked a lot of debate about whether they're striking the right balance.
They have, and I think it's a debate that's going to continue for some time.
Right.
Some people argue that the Fed is moving too aggressively,
Right.
that they risk, slowing down the economy too much.
Right.
Others believe that, more aggressive action is needed
Right.
to bring inflation under control.
Right. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
It is, yeah. It's a very tricky situation for the Fed.
Well, let's explore a trend now
Okay.
that's reshaping the way we consume entertainment, and that's microdramas.
Well, microdramas, yes.
Particularly their popularity in China.
Yeah, these are these short,
Right.
fast-paced episodes.
Right.
They've exploded in popularity in China.
They have.
They offer a very quick and engaging escape from, the stresses of everyday life.
Right. And they often tackle kind of very relatable themes, right?
They do, yeah. Things like love, family, career aspirations. Very everyday kind of issues that people can relate to.
Right.
But the Chinese government has taken notice.
Oh, they have. Okay.
They have, yeah. Yes, and they're not entirely pleased.
Oh, really? So what are they not happy about?
Well, in particular, they've cracked down on microdramas that depict characters, getting rich quickly
Wow.
or achieving success without hard work.
So they're basically saying that these dramas are promoting values
Exactly.
that clash with the idea of, hard work and struggle.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's a reflection of the Communist Party's ideology,
Right.
Which is very much based on the idea of, hard work, collective progress.
Shared prosperity.
Shared prosperity. Exactly.
And so they're concerned that these microdramas are undermining that message.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, they're worried that,
Yeah.
young people in particular
Right.
will start to believe that they can get rich quick
Right.
without putting in the effort. And that's not a message that the Communist Party wants to be sending.
So it's a reminder, I think, that even in a country as economically dynamic as China,
Yeah.
right, the government still exerts
Oh, absolutely.
significant control over media and messaging.
They do. Yeah. I mean, they're very careful
Yeah.
about shaping the narrative, promoting certain values, and discouraging those that they deem incompatible with the party line.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating example of how entertainment can be a battleground,
It is.
right, for ideological control.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that, governments use media to shape public opinion,
Right.
to promote certain values, to maintain social control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn our attention now to a country that's facing a perfect storm of challenges,
Okay.
and that is Mozambique.
Mozambique.
You've got disputed elections, economic hardship, social unrest, all kind of converging to create a very volatile situation.
It is. Yeah. I mean, the anger and frustration among young people in urban areas is palpable.
Right.
They're facing high unemployment,
Right.
rising costs of living, a lack of opportunities.
Right.
And they're increasingly disillusioned
Right.
with a political system that they perceive as corrupt
Right.
and unresponsive to their needs.
And it's a reminder, I think, that, economic grievances can be such a powerful driver of social unrest.
They can.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think the situation in Mozambique is kind of a microcosm
Right.
of the challenges facing many developing countries,
Yeah.
where you've got rapid population growth,
Right.
climate change, economic inequality, all kind of coming together.
Mind creating this breeding ground for discontent.
Exactly. And I think it's a reminder that, sustainable development
Yeah.
requires more than just economic growth.
Absolutely.
It requires addressing
Yeah.
issues of social justice, political inclusion, environmental sustainability.
It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive,
Exactly.
right? Not just a select few.
Absolutely.
Well, let's shift gears now
Okay.
to a topic that's at the forefront of technological innovation, and that's artificial intelligence,
Oh, yeah.
specifically the rise of agentic AI.
Agentic AI. Yeah, this is really exciting stuff.
It is.
I mean, it's about empowering AI systems
Right.
to act on our behalf.
Right. Not just respond to our commands.
Exactly.
Right, but
to actually
learn our preferences.
learn your preferences, anticipate your needs.
Right.
Complete tasks without requiring constant human intervention.
Yeah, it's like having a personal assistant who not only knows your schedule,
Yeah.
but can also book your flights, order your groceries, manage your finances, all while learning and adapting to your preferences over time.
Exactly. And I think the potential applications are vast.
They are. I mean, from automating mundane tasks
Yeah.
in the workplace
Right.
to creating personalized educational experiences to providing 24/7 healthcare support.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really incredible.
It is, yeah. But as with any powerful technology,
Yeah.
there are also potential risks
Yeah.
and ethical considerations.
Yeah. What kind of risks are we talking about?
Well, I think one of the key challenges is ensuring that these AI agents act in accordance with our values and intentions. I mean,
Yeah.
how do we program morality and ethics into these systems?
Yeah.
How do we prevent them from being biased or discriminatory?
Right.
And what about the potential for these AI agents to be used for malicious purposes?
Right. Could they be hacked or manipulated to harm individuals or society as a whole?
That's right.
Yeah. So there's a lot to think about.
There is a lot to think about.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating and potentially transformative technology.
It is.
But it requires, I think, very careful consideration and ethical guidelines to ensure that it's used responsibly.
I completely agree.
Well, let's turn our attention now to a story that highlights the fragility of democracy and the importance of safeguarding hard-won freedoms.
Yeah.
South Korea, a nation that has made remarkable progress in its transition to democracy, is facing a new threat from within.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it's a very worrying development.
It is.
I mean, President Yoon Suk Yeol's recent attempt to impose martial law, a move that evoked memories of the country's authoritarian past, sparked outrage and protests across the country.
Yeah, it really does make you think about, how delicate these transitions to democracy can be.
It does. It's South Korea has made, tremendous progress in its transition to democracy, but this incident shows that, it's not a done deal.
Right.
It's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and a commitment to upholding those democratic values.
And it's really inspiring to see how the South Korean people have responded.
It is.
Right? They haven't just sat back and let this happen.
No, they haven't. They've taken to the streets. They've made their voices heard.
They have.
And they've demanded that their rights be respected.
It's a real testament to the power of people.
It is, yeah.
Right? And the importance of civic engagement.
Absolutely. And I think it also highlights the enduring legacy of South Korea's pro-democracy movement.
Right.
Those who fought so hard against authoritarian rule
Right.
and paved the way for the vibrant democracy that the country enjoys today.
Right. That legacy is still alive.
It is. It's still very much alive, and I think it continues to inspire people to stand up for what they believe in.
Well, let's turn our attention back to the U.S. now.
Okay.
Where the incoming Trump administration is facing a number of pressing challenges.
Yeah, they've got a lot on their plate.
They do. And one issue that I think is going to be front and center is the economy,
Oh, absolutely.
particularly the issue of inflation.
Yeah, taming inflation without triggering a recession is a tough challenge.
It is.
And it's going to require a very delicate balancing act.
Yeah. The Fed's recent interest rate hikes have, sparked a lot of debate about whether they're striking the right balance.
They have, and I think it's a debate that's going to continue for some time.
Yeah.
Some argue that the Fed is moving too aggressively,
Right.
that they risk slowing down the economy too much.
Right.
Others believe that more aggressive action is needed to bring inflation under control.
So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
It's a very tricky situation
Yeah.
for the Fed and for the incoming administration.
Yeah, I think the incoming administration is also going to have to grapple with this issue of income inequality,
Oh,
which
absolutely.
has been widening in recent years.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
It is.
Yeah,
And it's really fueling a lot of the social unrest and political polarization.
it is. And it's not just a U.S. problem, of course.
No, it's a global problem.
It's a global problem.
But it's something that I think the incoming administration is going to have to address.
They are. And I think finding ways to create a more equitable economy,
Right.
one that provides opportunities for all Americans to succeed,
Right.
is going to be crucial for restoring, social cohesion
Right.
and ensuring long-term economic stability.
Yeah. And of course, there's the ongoing challenge of climate change.
Oh, yes. Climate change, the big one.
Yeah, which requires urgent action on a global scale.
Absolutely. And I think the incoming administration's stance on climate change is going to be, watched very closely
It will be.
by the rest of the world.
Right. I mean, will they continue to prioritize, short-term economic gains over long-term environmental sustainability?
That's the big question.
Or will they recognize the urgency of the climate crisis
Yeah.
and take meaningful steps to address it?
It's going to be fascinating to see how they approach this,
It will.
because the world is watching.
The world is watching.
And the stakes are high.
They are, well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored everything from political upheavals and economic trends to technological advancements and cultural shifts.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey
It has been.
through the global landscape.
And it's a reminder, I think, that we live in a world that's constantly changing,
We do.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed,
It is.
to challenge our assumptions,
Yeah.
and to be open to new ideas.
Absolutely, because the moment you think you've got it all figured out,
Yeah,
the world throws you a curveball.
yeah, well said. Well, we encourage you to continue exploring these issues.
Yeah.
Challenge your own assumptions, form your own opinions.
Keep learning, keep thinking, keep questioning.
Exactly, because in a world that's constantly changing, the most valuable skill you can possess
Yeah.
is the ability to think critically,
Yeah, absolutely.
to adapt to new information,
Yeah.
and to engage in, meaningful dialogue with others.
Well said.
Well, until next time, keep diving deep
Look, dive in.
and stay curious.
Stay curious.